4, 3, 2, 1. MDS, we have ignition, we have a liftoff.
Roll program is in on time. Vehicle response is normal. Very smooth flight, very, very small attitude disturbances.
Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every young couple in love, every teacher of morals, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on the mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world.
Travel back in time to discover how events in our world's history suggest that we are not alone in the universe, and that our pale blue dot does have a purpose. Thousands of years ago, in an area now known as the cradle of civilization, an ambitious king had an encounter that would shape the world to come. Babylon was the greatest city on earth, and its legacy still lives on. Passing through its imposing Ishtar Gate, travelers found a city teeming with life and full of gold and riches. This crowning jewel of antiquity was the envy of the world.
Any visitor to Babylon at the height of its power would be absolutely staggered by the spectacle of its monumental architecture and by the fact that there gathered in the city were people from all over the world. It was a true metropolis.
Babylon proclaimed itself to be the first city in the world. It was the city that the gods had first created, and this conceit reflected the fact that it was indeed a metropolis of an order and scale that the world had never seen before.
One night, Babylon's king Nebuchadnezzar was awoken by an unusual dream. A young Hebrew slave named Daniel was called to interpret the dream.
Daniel, like many people in the ancient world, believed that dreams were significant. And God communicated, or gods communicated through dreams. And Daniel believed that his God, the God of the Hebrews, knew the meaning and the interpretation of this dream.
In the king's dream, he saw a giant statue made of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, with feet of iron mixed with clay. Daniel revealed that each metal represented a mighty empire, beginning with Babylon as the head of gold. He accurately predicted the rise and fall of empires. But what evidence is there that Daniel wrote of events before they happened? The Dead Sea Scrolls contain sections of Daniel's writings and are dated to the 2nd century BC. The Jewish historian Josephus tells of Daniel's writings being presented to Alexander the Great when he visited Jerusalem in the 4th century BC. And scholars note that the Aramaic used to write his book is a perfect match with the Aramaic of the 6th century BC.
The first time I was exposed to this dream, I was admittedly skeptical. I mean, the idea that more than 2,000 years of human history is being told in advance by a dream of about 150 words is hard to believe. And I was confronted with the idea that either we're dealing with something that's a bit of a hoax or a put-on, or something supernatural is in play.
Daniel had predicted that an empire represented by the chest and arms of silver would rise to conquer Babylon. At the height of Babylonian dominance, Daniel foretold that an inferior kingdom will rise.
My name is Atafe and I live in Shiraz. It is one of the most beautiful cities of Iran, known for its gardens and poets. In my spare time, I love to take photos. As a Muslim woman, I feel in awe when I come to this mosque.
Muslims, Jews, and Christians cherish Daniel as a sacred prophet. And over 2,000 years ago, a conqueror would rise from the east to lead a charge against the mighty empire of Babylon.
For some years before the fall of Babylon, the Babylonians knew that the king of what they called Parsu, or Persia, a man named Cyrus, was conquering large parts of the world beyond their borders.
After uniting with the neighboring Medes, Cyrus led his combined forces on a series of famous victories, firmly establishing his name as a star on the rise. But his rise would not be complete without the taking of Babylon.
Herodotus portrays Cyrus as the very model of a great conqueror, and he portrays Babylon as Cyrus's greatest conquest, the supreme prize. And it's the supreme prize because it is the hardest nut to crack.
Babylon was one mighty fortress. Its massive walls, deep moat, and imposing gates made it impossible for any invading force to conquer. Confronted by walls that could not be breached, Persian troops identified the river Euphrates as the point of entry. Diverting the river upstream, Cyrus's troops were able to march along the riverbed, under gates, and into the heart of the city.
The walls of Babylon seemed impregnable to any invading force. And yet, in one of the great mysteries in history, the great city of Babylon fell in a single night into the hands of Cyrus.
And it is only once Cyrus has taken Babylon that the king of Persia can worthily call himself the king of the world.
Cyrus's conquests laid the foundation for the Medo-Persian Empire. Their large palace complexes can still be seen today.
When I walk through the ruins of these ancient cities, I sense a strong connection with the past. I feel as though the legacy and messages of the past live on today.
After conquering what seemed like the whole world, Cyrus died in battle. His tomb stands testimony to his enduring legacy.
Today, Cyrus is still recognized as one of our country's greatest heroes. The empire he created was built on respect for others and a desire for lasting peace. I think that is something we all want.
As the kings of Persia died, their bodies would be laid to rest here. Their elevated positions a fitting symbol of their dominance and strength. But there is an unfinished tomb here. The last of the Persian kings was only just warming the throne when he would come face to face with an agent of Daniel's prophecy. A young and valiant general from the hills of Macedon had set his eyes on Persian destruction. The Medo-Persian Empire had conquered Babylon, just as Daniel predicted. But Daniel's next prediction concerned the rise of a third empire, one of bronze, who would rule over the whole earth.
The climbing here is like a tradition, passes from father to son. We have easy routes and small rocks, and we have the big rocks. The highest top of the rocks is 250 meters. Fear is coming with climbing, and you enjoy climbing most when you fear. Before I climb, usually take some breaths. It's quiet up there. You're feeling the loneliness.
Today, monasteries adorn the peaks of these sheer cliffs. In the 14th century, a lone monk named Verlam scaled these steep rock faces to construct a monastery. Under the watchful eye of a monk is a fresco depicting a key figure of Daniel's timeline, Alexander the Great. Alexander was born in the small state of Macedon. Upon becoming king at the age of 20, he proposed the unthinkable, to invade the mighty Persian Empire. Early victories filled Alexander with confidence, but it would be the dusty plain of Gaugamela where Alexander would risk it all.
He invades Mesopotamia, Iraq, in the consciousness that by doing so, he will have the whole empire of the world in his hands if he wins.
This is it. This is the absolute decisive battle, because whoever wins this one is going to be either still the king of Persia or the new king of Persia.
The Persian king had sent him a peace offer saying that, you have the western half and leave me with the eastern half and we will have peace on those terms. And Alexander's right-hand man, a general called Parmenio, said that if I were you, I would accept these terms. To which Alexander said, yeah, and if I were you, I would accept them. But he's not. He's Alexander. It's impossible for him to accept terms. He has to push on. He has to go to the limits.
In all of the battles he fought, really, he was just going to go for it and just go for the jugular.
The climax of his entire reign was approaching. Everything hung on it.
Leading his forces towards the right flank, Alexander forced a gap to emerge in the Persian line. Persian chariots reacted by charging towards the Greek center. Alexander exploited the opening and pursued the retreating Persian king on horseback. Although heavily outnumbered on foreign soil, Alexander commanded a famous victory to bring about the downfall of one empire and the rise of another. The Empire of Silver was replaced by the Empire of Bronze, just as Daniel had said it would.
There is a sense in which Alexander was a terrifying and blood-stained opponent, and we should absolutely not romanticize him. He killed a lot of people, and his greatness was raised amid the blood of a lot of people.
Alexander would establish himself in Babylon at the former palace of King Nebuchadnezzar. But when reflecting on his conquests, he wept, for there were no more lands for him to conquer.
Alexander was literally epoch-making. He marks the transition from one era to another.
Without the genius of Alexander and without the military revolution that Philip, his father, had initiated, it's perfectly possible to imagine a world in which the Persian Empire continues.
In many ways, I'd say perhaps that, as someone else has said before me, I think that Alexander the Great was his own greatest creation.
His Greek empire had conquered the then known world with astonishing speed. One man had fulfilled Daniel's prediction. Daniel predicted a fourth empire would rise to global power. Then there will be a fourth empire, one strong like iron. Just like iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, so it will break in pieces and crush the others. Located at the heart of the Mediterranean Sea is a city that grew from obscurity to become the center of a global empire. Rome, Caput Mundi, capital of the world. Architectural wonders still stand, lasting symbols of strength and ambition. For over 20 years, Adriano Moravito has studied the foundations of the Roman Empire, hidden deep below ground.
Many people come to Rome to visit what is above ground, but what lays underground is much more. Rome was a mega city of the past. The greatness of the Roman Empire is due to the network of roads that were made to conquer the different territories, and by creating for every city a proper aqueduct.
Aqueducts were built that thereby enabled the city to grow. And they also built roads, and the roads were built essentially, if you like, as the kind of the threads of a net cast across conquered territory.
I think it's one cliche that's often said that all roads lead to Rome. But I think it would be better to say that all roads lead from Rome.
Roman roads took supplies and soldiers to the far reaches of the empire, bringing carnage and brutality wherever they went.
When Western armies launch attacks, what they boast about is how few casualties they've inflicted. When Julius Caesar went to Gaul, he boasted about how many he'd slaughtered.
But bloodshed wasn't restricted to foreign lands. Cheering spectators would gather in the Colosseum to watch as thousands were put to violent deaths.
In many ways, the arena is the quintessentially Roman institution. This was an expression of their manliness, of their superiority over the barbarian world and over the natural world.
At the height of the Roman Empire, nearly 1 in 5 people on the planet lived and died under the rule of the emperor. Its borders stretched from North Africa to Britannia. By 476 AD, barbarian invasions had reduced the Roman Empire's borders to a size not seen in 6 centuries.
There were predators on the margins, people called barbarians by the Romans.
Many of them were dominated by the Romans and lost their freedoms to them, and obviously they resented and hated that.
They were able to step in and take over vast chunks of what had been the Roman Empire.
Daniel had predicted that the Roman Empire would crumble from within. As you saw the feet and toes, partly of clay and partly of iron, so the kingdom shall be divided, and partly strong and partly fragile. Barbarian tribes divided the Roman Empire, and these new nations would lay the foundation for Europe to come.
For Europeans, Rome is the ghost that will not go away. And almost the moment that the rule of the Caesars had collapsed, there were people who wanted to try and restore it.
There's a sense in which you could argue that the Roman Empire never really fell, and that we, as modern Europeans, are just latter-day Romans.
Daniel's next prediction was that European kings and queens would seek to repair the divided empire through marriage alliances. As you saw, the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage. But they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. As the 20th century approached, many of Europe's political powers were linked by marriage alliances. But family feuds would ignite events that would drag Europe through 2 world wars. Millions would perish as ambitious leaders sought to resurrect a united European empire. Determined to never allow Europe to descend into another bloody war, world leaders came together to sign peace treaties, paving the way for the development of the European Union. But the tension remains. Once open borders are being walled up, social and religious fears spill into the streets. Economic inequality, rising unemployment, and political extremism are gaining ground. It is clear the iron and the clay aren't mixing.
Daniel's dream contains 7 predictive elements. That is, Babylon to Medo-Persia, Medo-Persia to Greece, Greece to Rome. And of those 7 predictive elements, 6 have already come to pass. Now, just the sheer force of logic and of the odds would suggest that if 6 of the 7 predictive elements have happened, that the 7th is very likely to happen as well.
Daniel predicted that the gold of Babylon would pass into the hands of another. The empire of Cyrus would come to an end. The selfishness and greed of man's empires could never succeed. The strength and brutality of the Roman Empire would meet its match. Its borders fragmenting, divided from within, and efforts to unite against the Word of God would continually fail.
The final predictive element is that a stone cut out without hands, that's Daniel's way of saying a supernatural intervention, would strike the image on the feet of iron and clay. This would signify the end of all earthly kingdoms, and that God would establish finally his own eternal kingdom.
Today, our pale blue dot is positioned at the end of Daniel's timeline. He predicted that during the time of modern Europe, God would return to earth to establish his eternal kingdom.
The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot.
Daniel's prophecy binds together the hopes of humanity and reveals a God who has become part of our world.
Daniel's final words to the king were that the dream was certain and its interpretation was sure. Our lives are often characterized by things that are not certain and not sure. We face the future with confusion and anxiety. But this whole narrative strongly suggests that human history and our own personal history is going somewhere. That in fact there is purpose and hope and even destiny.
Millions ask if a God is out there watching our earth spin into a meaningless future. But nowhere is the reality of God more apparent than in the writings of Daniel. His extraordinary revelation of the history of world empires defies reason and chance. It tells of God's hand guiding our world's history and a kingdom to come.
After 2,000 years, finding places like this is extremely important. I think that the most interesting thing when you enter is just trying to imagine how the space was back in antiquity.
At the height of its power, the Roman Empire was geographically enormous. The Roman military was just an awesome fighting machine, and in the end, it could always outmaneuver, outfight, outstay pretty much any opposition that was put in its way.
The glory of Rome was the envy of the world, but its sword was merciless to any who defied its authority. After Emperor Nero destroyed Rome by fire in 64 AD, he ordered the annihilation of the city's Christians, who he blamed for the fires that devastated the city.
Nero needed scapegoats. There were rumors starting to spread that Nero himself had begun the fire. Christians seem to have been a kind of convenient collection of oddballs, weirdos, freaks. Nero picks on them because they are malevolent, superstitious devotees of a strange kind of cult, and therefore exactly the kind of people who the Roman people would regard with the utmost suspicion.
Many of the people who had died before for the Christian religion, and we call them martyrs, they were buried inside the catacombs. So the catacombs became a very special place. As an art historian, I'm really interested about the decoration of the graves. The Christians, all of them say, "Sleep in peace." This message of resting in peace before the resurrection.
For hope of deliverance, many Christians turn to the writings of the Hebrew prophet Daniel. Writing in 605 BC, Daniel had a vision from God that foretold the rise and fall of future kingdoms. Animal beasts were used to represent the kingdoms. The lion of Babylon, the bear of Medo-Persia, and the leopard of Greece would all rise and fall. A fourth beast, Rome, would emerge and rule in one form or another until the end of the ages. In the 4th century, the fate of Rome would forever be changed by one of its 4 emperors, Constantine. In the spring of 312 AD, Constantine set his eyes on total control of the empire. With an army of 40,000 soldiers, he led his troops south towards the Eternal City.
Constantine was bearing down on Rome, and his adversary Maxentius faces up to him. The battle is for certainly the control of Rome, in a sense for the soul of Rome, in that religious sense as well. The sources speak of Constantine having a vision in which he receives Christian symbols, and he puts these symbols on the weaponry, on the shields of his forces. So they go into battle under the protection of the Christian God as they see it. The combat is a hard-fought one. It ends up really with Maxentius's troops being slaughtered in the River Tiber by Constantine's men.
The defeated emperor is beheaded, and Constantine enters the ancient capital of the world in triumph as Caesar, and as he does so, he has the head of his defeated enemy on his spear. He ends up ruler of the entire empire.
Victorious and proclaimed as emperor, Constantine brought the persecution of Christians to an end. Christianity became the religion of Rome. one God for one empire.
When a persecuted minority suddenly becomes either the majority or comes into some power, you now have the problems not of persecution, but of power. How do you handle power? How do you handle people who disagree with you? Now you're the one holding the reins.
Christianity has been acceptable under Constantine, and now under Theodosius, it's paganism that is not acceptable. From then on, Christianity, I think, is, if you like, officially dominant rather than just officially acceptable.
Daniel's prophecy had described Rome as a beast, dreadful, terrible, and exceedingly strong. It depicted 10 horns on the head of the Roman beast, representing the 10 barbarian tribes that would prevail and occupy the lands once under Roman rule. Daniel foretold that 3 of these horns or kingdoms would be uprooted. The tribes of the Vandals, Ostrogoths, and Visigoths were uprooted, just as Daniel had foretold, 1,000 years before the events. Their demise paved the way for the rise of a little horn, a small kingdom that would rise from within Rome. This little horn power would stand in the place of God and rule for over 1,000 years. Daniel's prophecy outlined a religio-political power rising from the ashes of the Roman Empire to wage war against God and his people in an epic struggle for dominion. The prophecy had foretold that the little horn power would seek to change times and laws of God. Far from the church bells of Rome sat a series of islands, untamed by Roman armies. Its wild oceans still taunt sailors today.
I've been a fisherman since I left school. I used to go out fishing with my father when I was a young boy, and that's how I learned how to fish. Been fishing all these years, and it's a job I like, and I'll never do anything else.
Celtic Christians trace their heritage back to first-century believers who handed down their faith from generation to generation.
This barbarous island beyond the reaches of the ocean, which had not been part of the Roman Empire and therefore had not been subjected to the process of Christianization that had affected the provinces under Constantine and his heirs, it ends up becoming this kind of blazing beacon of Christian faith.
For almost 1,000 years or so, they were one of the few holdouts to true biblical Christianity in a world that was being swept by political and otherwise traditional influences. That isolation, if you will, actually served them very well.
Fishing's not always the best job to do. You have your good days and your bad days. You've really got to respect the sea because it can change very easy. It can be nice one minute and very bad the next.
These windswept islands became a battleground for truth. The Sabbath, a weekly time set aside for remembrance and rest, was to become the object of the little horn power's most intense hatred.
Pope Gregory III had warned his priests against the Celts and against the charge of, quote, Judaizing. And by that they mean keeping the seventh-day Sabbath.
You know, you see the Sabbath all the way back from Genesis, where God instituted the Sabbath. You see the Old Testament, you see Jesus keeping it, the apostles keeping it. And so, of course, a New Testament believer, without any other influence of tradition or something, if you just pick up the Bible and you see what did Jesus teach in his word, what did Jesus practice in his life, and then just continue it on just like the apostles had, Sabbath keeping would not be a foreign, new, strange concept. It's what's written in the scriptures. They just kept going.
Christ worshipped on the Sabbath, the seventh day of the week, and so had his followers. It was a day to do good, to rest, to worship God as Creator and remember His goodness.
The Sabbath day is uniquely important, the seventh-day Sabbath, above any other day. And that is because on that day, we see in the Ten Commandments, in the fourth commandment, when it's outlined who He is, it shows that He's the Creator God. It gives the domain of what He created, and it gives His name, His personal name. So we see that there are three elements there that indicate this particular day has His signature. This is a revelation of who God is.
The little horn power conspired to replace God's sacred Sabbath with a pagan substitute. At a church council in the 4th century, it was decreed that all who would not work on the Sabbath were Judaizers and should be excommunicated.
Rome, in its paganism, had worshipped the sun itself as an object of veneration. Constantine practiced this in his own life. He was a worshiper of the sun. But he also wanted to merge Christianity in that, and somehow he found the venerable day of the sun as a placeholder that could bring all these other pagan and somehow Christian practices together. Now we have the resurrection of Jesus Christ on this day. We have the pagan practices that go before it. It's a natural day of worship, and here we have the right being to worship. Let's fuse these together and basically create an amalgamation of worship practices and place it on that day.
The Church of Rome had set up a new day of worship to rival God's Sabbath, claiming a right reserved to God alone, to establish divine times and laws.
You see in both Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 as a sequence of kingdoms and nations, right? And you have Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. All of them do essentially the same things. They're military powers or they're conquering empires. They take over the subsequent one and the subsequent one after that. But when you get to this beast of Daniel 7, especially this little horn power that comes out of this fourth beast, this one's aim and objective is to take on God Himself.
When I read Daniel 7, you've got this prophet writing centuries and centuries before, depicting the attempted change of the Sabbath by Rome to Sunday. Now, you might think, well, what's the big deal? Well, this is God's law. It's His 10 commandments, and it says the seventh day is the Sabbath. And what gives some human power, some man-made power, the right to come in and change it? To try to usurp that is an attempt to usurp the role and authority of God Himself.
For hundreds of years, the Celtic Church resisted Roman darkness with the light of God's Word. They persisted as a lamp shining on a hill, and their missionaries influenced thousands across Europe, encouraging them to remain faithful amid the oncoming flood of persecution. The prophecy had foretold that the little horn power would oppress the saints of the Most High. Other prophecies said it would not relent until it was drunk with the blood of martyrs. In response, God's people fled to the wilderness, to a place prepared by God. Nestled below these rugged mountain peaks are valleys that were once the hidden homes of faithful believers.
I have lived in the area of Torrepellice since I was born. I'm impressed by the beauty of the mountain. The forests in the valley are very dense populated by trees, and sometimes it's very difficult to find the path to reach the summit.
In the peaceful valleys of these Alps lived a people who traced their heritage and beliefs to the time of the apostles. The Waldenses, the people of the valleys.
They were up in the mountains and it was kind of hard to get to them. And they did as much as they possibly could for as long as they possibly could, try to avoid the Roman Church and the unfortunate corruptions that came in to the church.
The most characteristic thing that Waldenses seem to have believed is that the claims to spiritual authority and spiritual superiority claimed by the Catholic priesthood were bogus. When the church tries to discipline them and tries to forbid them to do what they're doing, then they witness against the church hierarchy.
My family traces the history to the Waldenses. Waldenses were mountain people without connected to the big city.
What today we call the Roman Catholic Church, it was actually a revolutionary institution. The church, led by figures in Rome and by the figure of the Pope, embarked on this great process that they called reformatio, the remaking of the world. And they wanted to do that because they wanted to purge what they saw as earthly sin from the fabric of the Christian people.
From the 1230s onwards, you have the beginning of the medieval practice of inquisition. Judges traveling around various bits of Europe looking for trouble. When the Waldensian communities realized that they were under legal threat, they become more clandestine, they become more secretive.
The caves of the valley became the Waldenses' refuge to escape the watchful eye of their hunters.
The Roman Church felt that it was obliged to persecute because the church believed that as long as there were obstinate dissenters around, they were persuading others and were therefore leading souls to spend eternity in hell.
The Waldenses were a particular irritant to the power of the church at that time. You have here a people who, in their simplicity, in their humility, are a standing rebuke to the very system you're trying to build. They weren't intending to be smug or arrogant or something like that, but it just showed such a stark contrast to what the church had become versus what the church was supposed to be.
The Roman Church had the power to wipe out heresy when it saw heresy and didn't see the problem with meting out this kind of earthly justice, supposedly with this heavenly mandate. When you have a church that has that kind of power, that actually thinks we can wipe out heresy, it's simple, and we're doing it with God's authority. It's the ugliest thing in history because people then have no impunity, they don't hesitate.
The Waldenses are such an irritant to Rome at this point. Pope Innocent VIII issues a decree, a bull, and he calls for their extermination. In fact, calls for them to be crushed like venomous snakes.
Essentially, they become enemies of the state. Their property is up for grabs. Their lives are not valuable. Anyone who commits any action against them is completely absolved of any wrongdoing. And so essentially, they are fair game. It's open hunting season for this group of people who simply want to honor God.
In 1487, armies under papal orders marched on the valley, determined to purge it of its inhabitants. But the mountains proved their fortress as they escaped amid dense fog. Rome did not relent. In the years that followed, the persecution intensified. Fleeing to the caves of the towering Mount Castelluzzo, those who were found were thrown from its heights, their blood spilt in the dirt that had fed and protected them for centuries. The prophecy foretold that the little horn power would persecute the people of God. The Waldenses, like hundreds of thousands of Jews, Muslims, and Protestants, were tortured and killed by the Roman Church for thinking differently. For almost 1,000 years, Europe had been engulfed in a deepening darkness. But the dawn of a new era beckoned. Daniel's prophecy foretold that the little horn power would engage in a boastful war against God. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people. This power would cast truth to the ground and speak in the place of God.
Eisenach has a long history of amazing musicians, dating back to the 17th century, as it is the birthplace of Johann Sebastian Bach. Musicians like myself are inspired by his talent. The cello I perform with dates back hundreds of years to the times of Johann Sebastian Bach.
Emerging from a German monastery, a young monk set in motion a reform that would destroy the world he knew. His name? Martin Luther.
Luther visits Rome and then does all the things that a faithful pilgrim to Rome would do. One of them is to climb the so-called Sancta Scala on his knees. The church put out there for these pilgrims, they said, if you climb these stairs on your knees and pray these prayers, we can guarantee that your godless grandfather who's in purgatory and will be there for another 40,000 years suffering, that he will get out of purgatory. Luther dutifully, as a young man, jumps through these hoops and in this case, climbs these stairs on his knees faithfully for the sake of his grandfather's soul. And when he gets to the top, he had this profoundly horrifying thought enter his mind. What if it isn't true?
The city Luther departed was to become the focal point for a vision of splendor, of a scale never before seen. Plans to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica were announced, and no expense was to be spared. Indulgences, or certificates to release a soul from hell, were sold by the church to pay for the construction. Access to heaven was now sold in the marketplace. Guilt had been monetized, and for great profit. Forgiveness of sin was no longer considered a free gift of God. Pilgrimages, self-mutilation, and hours of painful prostration stood in place of Christ's redeeming blood. Souls who sought peace with God turned to confession with a human priest, unable to cleanse the sinner of guilt and shame. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was worshipped as the Queen of Heaven and mediator between God and humans. Hosts of other saints quickly joined her, their relics and bodies venerated and traded as tokens of fate and fortune. Papal councils proclaimed the Pope as Holy Father and God on earth, infallible when speaking in council. To question the Pope was to question God himself. The fear of an eternally burning hell and purgatory were taught from pulpits to guarantee compliance. Any who dared challenge the Pope's authority were met with fire and the sword. With his eyes open to the grace of God, Luther turned his face from Rome, never to look back.
He was simply going to go where he felt the truth would lead him. He comes on these various scriptures that make it plain that it is only by faith that I can be saved.
Over the course of the centuries of the papacy's control of Europe, ways of understanding Scripture have been erected that have blocked the individual Christian off from gaining what Scripture can provide. Luther comes to see the Roman Church as being a pagan temple full of perverted images that must be pulled down. And therefore, the person who presides over this, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, this is Antichrist. This is the whore of Babylon. This is a figure who is in a way worse than a pagan because he is kind of dressing himself up in the robes of a good Christian, which therefore are all the more dangerous and pernicious.
Beginning with the aggressive sale of indulgences to fatten the pockets of the church and the persistent reticence of Rome to rectify the abuses of power, Luther confessed his suspicion that the earthly Roman potentate was the very Antichrist mentioned by Paul.
Anti doesn't just mean against something, but in the biblical sense, it means to be in the place of something. So this is not just a power that wants to get rid of God or argue against God or defy God. It wants to replace God.
For identifying the Pope as Antichrist and publishing works against the Church, Luther was summoned to stand trial before the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire at the German town of Worms.
Luther goes there having no idea what he's facing. When he's finally questioned, he's thinking he's going to get an opportunity to say his piece, but the papal delegate effectively tells him, we're not interested in what you have to say. Yes or no? Do you revoke everything you've said and all these bad things you've written or not? Yes or no? Yes or no? But he thought, how can I do that? I've written all these books, many of which you approve of. What in which books do you disapprove of? What do you need me to recant? And they really wouldn't tell him. So in the end, he's stuck. And he says, based on what you've said And based on my conscience and my understanding of things before God, I have no choice but to say what I have said. Here I stand, I can do no other. It deserves to be known as the moment when Luther faced the Pope and all of the power in the world and said, I choose God.
Luther was condemned as a heretic, and his life was in danger. He departed Worms to return home as an enemy of the state.
Luther has said his piece at Worms. Now, what's going to happen? No one knows. So he is allowed ostensibly to go back home to Wittenberg, but they believe that on the way to Wittenberg, or maybe in Wittenberg, he will be arrested, hauled to Rome, and executed.
Luther leaves Worms, probably the most famous person in Europe. He's heading back to Wittenberg, and then something happens that makes the story even more sensational. A band of horsemen descend on Luther and his party. They're all armed with crossbows, hold the party up. They take Luther, they gallop off, and no one has any idea where Luther's gone. Everybody is now talking about Luther.
In a secret plot, Luther was kidnapped by his own supporters. For almost a year, Luther would be disguised as a knight within the walls of this mighty fortress, Wartburg Castle.
He was hidden there, disguised as a knight. He grew a beard, he grew out his tonsure, he dressed as a knight. No one at the Wartburg who was there had any idea that this is the monk, Martin Luther.
These were really difficult times for Luther. He was alone, he was under protective custody, so he contented himself and occupied himself by writing.
While confined to this small room, Luther translated the New Testament into the language of the common people.
Luther knew that if we could get the words of God and the stories of God into the hands of the average person, they won't just be following their leaders, they can learn for themselves what God says. When he realized that, it didn't just change Luther, it ended up changing literally the whole world in which we live.
Luther's flame of hope blazed across the empire. A mighty fortress is our God. His famed anthem of the Reformation would stir hearts for ages to come.
What he did was absolutely revolutionary. There's no way for us to comprehend how the world changed when that book was made available to anyone who wanted it.
Luther was not without his personal faults, but his reform challenged 1,000 years of human tradition and introduced the grace of God to the common people. God's word had broken through Europe's long and dark night. Daniel had foretold that the Little Horn Power would experience 1,260 years of political and religious supremacy. But the same prophecy said that at an appointed time, its dominion would come to an end.
The magnificent architecture and rich history of Paris make it one of my favorite places to paint. Everywhere I look, I see beauty and light contrasted against darkness.
Both sides in the Reformation are absolutely convinced that they are right and that the future of the Christian people is at stake.
The initial response of the Roman Catholic Church to the Reformation was, in effect, all-out war. They doubled down on their errors as a result of feeling that, the Protestants are implacable enemies.
In the late 18th century, Paris descended into chaos. Cobbled streets ran red with blood. As France, Rome's old friend, prepared to lance a deadly wound, Europe's long night of spiritual darkness was coming to an end.
Streets and squares that were once places of revolution and bloodshed are now home to people seeking a future of peace and love.
The revolutionaries in France saw themselves as sweeping away the idols of an old order. And these idols were the monarchy, the nobility, and the church. And the conviction was that if they swept these idols away, then a new era of universal brotherhood would come in. There is an ambition to remake the world, to purge it of idolatry and oppression, and to bring people into the light of a new age.
From the Reformation to the 1700s, internal wars of religion ravaged Europe. The decimation, the death, and the carnage that occurred left Europe, one scholar says, it was almost akin to the Black Death, how it was left. And all this was in the name of religion.
In the mind of French philosopher Voltaire, the reformers had not done enough to bring down the Pope's authority.
Voltaire had been born in the Catholic Church, he'd been educated by the Jesuits, but he ended up kind of condemning them as frauds and pedophiles, and he came to view Christianity with a kind of hatred that bordered on the obsessional. What really got him going was what he called l'infâme, this kind of infamous monstrosity, by which basically he meant the Catholic Church. This idea that the Catholic Church had accrued to itself the right to torture to death people who were invariably innocent. And that's what he wanted. Écraser l'infâme, he said, destroy this infamous horror.
Rome had presented a distorted picture of God's character as tyrannical and his law as oppressive. And the logical consequence was the rejection of both God and his word. Rome's iron heel had stomped out all civility from the masses. They identified God with Rome and would have none of either. As a result, the faithless and degraded masses revolted with a brutality and aggression that was felt around the world.
Voltaire did not accomplish his aim, but another Frenchman, at the end of the 1260 years of dominance, fulfilled a key detail of Daniel's prophecy. In the summer of 1798, French troops, under the leadership of General Berthier, marched south to Rome and occupied the city.
Napoleon sends Berthier down into Rome. You have this dramatic confrontation where the general marches into the Holy See and claims that the papacy is done. This is now a republic. This is now a civil power, not a religious one. The Pope refuses to relent. They take him captive, and he's moved from prison to prison, where he eventually dies in exile in France.
This event was a huge blow to the Roman Catholic Church, and when it happened, the 1260 years of its dominance came to an end.
Established religion had been cast aside for the religion of the secular. The old order had been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Daniel had foretold that a power would rise from Rome's ashes, challenge the authority and laws of God, distort his character and teachings, and crush any who defy its decrees. But God's people would endure to the end. Reformers stood for truth, though the heavens fell. Revolutionaries inflicted a deadly wound and brought an end to Roman oppression.
What you're seeing in Daniel chapter 7 is a deep, unmoving love of God. He's outlining a system that is working in cohort and concert with the enemy of our souls. Every person who is a part of that faith, every person who has ever decided to believe simply because this is how they were taught, he gives them a simple call: come out, come out.
Kings and emperors, popes and peasants have all fought for dominion. Dominion over empires and even the souls of humankind. But light shined in darkness, and darkness did not overcome it. God's character was revealed through his words and the lives of his people. Today, the same God of grace who called his people from darkness to light invites all to know him and enter his kingdom. A kingdom whose dominion will never pass away. The story of pilgrims and Puritans seeking a new life of freedom began in the Old World.
The land here is second to none. Beautiful mountains, creeks, nature. When my dad started, he was 17 years old. And to see where he's at now, I've always wanted to follow in his footsteps.
Fleeing the tyranny of religious persecution, European Christians sought for a new life of freedom. Emerging from the earth, a symbol of a relatively unpopulated area, this collection of new colonies would be established on two foundational principles. And I saw another beast come up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb.
In Bible prophecy, horns are a symbol of power. Having the 2 horns are said to be lamb-like. The lamb, of course, is a symbol of Jesus.
You have 2 parallel powers ruling simultaneously in this new nation. You have the church side of things, the spiritual side, and you have the civil side of the state that's free from all monarchy rule or kings. And that's the first time that's ever happened in all of human history.
When I ride my horse, you can feel the wind, see the colors of the clouds, colors of the sky. You get to take the time and stop and recognize a beautiful thing at once.
The open skies provided a land of opportunities for those who believed in the God of the Bible, in many gods, or no God at all. America's founding documents enshrined its revolutionary ideas. Church and state were to be kept separate.
The concept of liberty, of self-government, really never happened in the world. At the heart of liberty is the risk that people will choose not to be free, that they will choose wrongly, that they will cease to be virtuous, and all of it falls apart. The most Christian thing you can do when you're forming a government is to allow people to reject Christian faith.
The Founding Fathers were very aware of all of the religious factionalism and the battles that had been fought over religion in the old world. And so rather than designating any one faith, let alone any one religious denomination as being the established religion, they said, let's stay out of it altogether. And so the First Amendment ensured that there would be this separation between church and state. And that, in turn, was a stroke of genius on their part.
Freedom at a ranch, it's so open down here, you don't worry about pretty much nothing. It's a dream come true. You know, not many people get to enjoy it, and I do, and I cherish it.
Men and women had fled the old world to establish the new. But not everyone who came to the new world enjoyed a life of freedom. And not everyone who came did so by choice. As free men and women arrived in the land of promise, so did thousands of slaves. Foretelling the developing character of this new nation, the prophecy said, "It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon."
My name is Reverend Robert Jones Sr., and I am a storyteller and a musician. I first became interested in music as a result of my grandmother bringing home an influential blues record. I was fascinated by the sound of acoustic country blues.
In 1619, an English privateer ship landed in Virginia, its hull filled with human cargo. African slaves were sold for food, beginning the new nation's sin of slavery. Despite having lamb-like qualities, this new nation would speak and act as a dragon.
There is an excruciating tension at the heart of American society that is
there right from the beginning. The founding document of the United States says that all men are created equal, but that's written by a man, Thomas Jefferson, who owns a slave.
Slavery is antithetical to the original concept of America and American liberty.
Racism and slavery are the great hypocrisy, the great contradiction, and the great evil at the heart of the American experiment.
For many enduring the hardships of slavery, they found hope in the stories of the Bible. Their experiences forever remembered in songs.
Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Don't you want to go to that gospel feast, to that promised land where all is peace? Oh, deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Don't you want to go to that gospel feast, to that promised land where all is peace? Oh, deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. I want to cross over into campground.
In the mid-1800s, Detroit became a beacon of hope for slaves seeking freedom. Codenamed Midnight, Detroit was the last stop in a long journey before crossing the river into Canada. The path to freedom became known as the Underground Railroad. Michigan's first African-American church was founded in 1836 at the Second Baptist Church by 13 former slaves.
When the freedom seekers arrived at most of the safe havens, especially the ones here at Second Baptist, they received shelter, clothing, a place to rest, food, and probably some directions on where to go.
Second Baptist Church helped freedom seekers escape oppression. But the issue of slavery continued to rage, leading to a brutal civil war.
We fought a war in which 500,000 young men died and slavery was abolished. We have to celebrate that. We have to celebrate that eventually, through the blood and the decades, we got this right. Where we got to was where most of the founders had hoped we could get to, and they were right, we did.
Slavery served as an example of this power speaking as a dragon.
Being righteous means to do something that is contrary to what the majority might like you or want you to do. And most of those abolitionists were more concerned about being righteous than about being good.
The founding documents stated that all were equal in the eyes of their Creator, but not all had been treated with dignity. The stain of slavery is a constant reminder of America's dark past. But the prophecy foretold a global persecution to come. Today, the United States of America stands as the undisputed superpower of the world. Its history shows a rapid rise to economic, military, and political dominance. During the 1800s, America developed at a frenzied pace. In the 1890s, American imperialism surged into Latin America and across the Pacific Ocean into East Asia. The destruction of 2 world wars devastated Japan, France, and Germany, leaving a global power vacuum soon to be filled.
The United States came swooping in the final years of those wars to claim the lion's share of the spoils and increased its relative advantage in wealth and military power through each of those wars.
The horror of World War II was brought to an end by the unleashing of America's most devastating weapon. In the following decades, America would seek to reshape the world into its image through democracy and free trade.
At the end of World War II, the United States accounted for half of the global economy. And so it was just in a dominant position we haven't seen from any other country. And it then formed institutions and alliances to essentially lock in those gains for the long run. And we're still largely living in the world that was created after World War II, when the United States was at the height of its relative power.
The United States' geographical position, supersized economy, and strong military have secured its status as a world power.
The American consumer market is bigger than that of the next 5 nations combined. The dollar is used in 90% of international financial transactions, which gives the US Treasury Department a lot of ability to cut countries out of the international trade system. And the US has military bases all over the globe and really only has the major aircraft carriers to move large military forces abroad and fight wars for an extended period of time on the other side of the globe. No other country comes close, and we just haven't seen this kind of gap between number 1 and number 2 before. If you actually look down at the major metrics of national power, it becomes very clear that the gap between number 1 and number 2 is much larger today than in any previous period of international history.
If you think about the criteria the Bible outlines for this power, trying to identify what it is, you're looking for a global power that can somehow influence the economies, the militaries, the legislative bodies, the societies around the world. And the United States is uniquely fit to that description.
During the 20th century, the United States became the greatest superpower the world has ever seen. But in order for the prophecy to be fulfilled, she would have to form a new and lasting alliance. The prophecy outlines two beasts or nations. Emerging from the peoples of Europe, the first beast blasphemed God and persecuted his true believers. It is identified as the Roman Church, in which the powers of the state and church combined. According to the prophecy, the second beast, the United States of America, would rise to world power and form an alliance with the first beast, the Roman Church. He executed all the authority of the first beast in his presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. During the 20th century, a new power came to the international stage: communism. Brutal dictators fed by evil ideologies spread death and disaster around the world. Here in the heart of Romania's capital, Ceausescu and his communist leaders delivered hate-filled speeches in the Omnia Room. These abandoned relics are a reminder of the brutality under their regime. Children suffered greatly, and many were forced to live in orphanages.
Abandoned in the orphanage, I faced bullying and isolation. I was forced to fight for entertainment.
I was left with 200 other children. Every day we would look through the front gates, wondering when our parents would come and get us.
The world watched on as an expanding Soviet empire challenged American power. A decision by 111 cardinals in Rome would strike communism in an unexpected way.
So after there had been nothing but Italian popes for 455 years, to pick a Polish pope at this time, really kind of the height of the Cold War, just astounded everybody.
The new Polish pope wasted no time confronting the evils of communism. His first visit was to his homeland, to Victory Square.
He stands there, and all around this massive crowd of repressed Poles chanting, "We want God, we want God." You have the communist secret police, and he tells them, he says, "Be not afraid."
Across the Atlantic Ocean, a young actor turned politician watched these events unfold.
In the United States, Ronald Reagan was at his home in California, turned on the evening news, and there were tears in Reagan's eyes. And he said, "That's it, that's it, that's it. The Pope is the key, the Pope is the key, the Pope is the key. We've got to reach out to this Vatican and this Pope, and we've got to find a way to get elected. This is the key to winning the Cold War."
6 weeks apart in the spring of 1981. Pope John Paul II and Ronald Reagan took bullets from would-be assassins. Both survived and confided to each other that God had saved their lives for the purpose of defeating communism.
This was the first time that you have an American president and a pope working together, and in the process, changing world history. Sometimes something good can happen, but a precedent can be set that becomes troubling down the way. And the question I think that many people ask is, how close does the US government want to get to any particular religious organization? Because we have historical precedent throughout history and throughout cultures that when the state and the religion get too close, both of them are corrupted.
As a child, I longed for freedom, for opportunities, and for a future of peace.
President Reagan met with the Pope in 1982 to orchestrate the divine plan. With the help of the CIA and Vatican cardinals, Reagan and the Pope were able to undermine the forces of communism.
I remember having been taught about American prophecy and how the United States was going to have this great influence on the world, unfortunately, negatively. And I remember thinking, well, how could that happen? How could prophecy be fulfilled with the Soviet Union everywhere? And then what? Was the Soviet Union going to just disappear or something? Probably the biggest nemesis to prophecy being fulfilled was the Soviet Union.
The Holy Alliance allowed orphans such as Teresia and Gita to find freedom. They now live to help others in need.
After high school, I met Gita. He was a big gift, and he showed me what affection and love feels like.
After meeting Teresia, my life changed. I entered university and now help other children.
The divine plan helped bring an end to the Cold War and liberated millions of people.
When Ronald Reagan was told, don't call the Soviet Union an evil empire, he pounded the desk. He said, it is an evil empire and it's time to shut it down. When John Paul II was asked by his own staff, no, don't go to Poland for your first trip. You can't do that. He pounded the desk. He said, we're going to Poland, and stood in front of that sea of repressed humanity and told them, be not afraid. So here are two men acting with conviction, Protestant president, right, Catholic Pope, and they were not afraid. They were not afraid to stand for what they believed was right and against evil. And in doing so, they came together and achieved one of the greatest events of the 20th century, of history. They peacefully won the Cold War.
A pope and a president had worked together to bring about the downfall of communism. America and the Roman Church had formed an alliance, just as the prophecy had foretold. The prophecy described a movement of deception to come. He deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image to the beast. The dangers of mixing religion with politics was seen in the life of the world's most famous evangelist, Billy Graham.
Billy Graham was a charismatic and captivating kid that grew up in a provincial and quaint environment. He was tall, he was handsome, he was engaging. When we think about Billy Graham, we're thinking about someone who always felt a little large for his environment.
Graham's passion to spread the good news of Jesus took him across the world, filling tents and stadiums with eager listeners. His popularity reached as far as the Oval Office, where he earned the listening ear of presidents such as Richard Nixon.
Graham was always drawn to political figures and to political power.
It's hard to imagine two people who are, on the face of things, as different as Billy Graham and Richard Nixon. I mean, Graham was known for his piety and his modesty, and Nixon cursed like a drunken sailor.
They met in the Senate dining room shortly after Nixon's election to the Senate in 1950. And they played golf that afternoon. They were that close and immediately forged a friendship.
Graham's friendship grew, and he became a close advisor to the president. But that would all change.
Ever since Billy Graham had the opportunity to meet Harry Truman, he had been trying to get inside that West Wing and have access to the White House and the halls of power. But after the disaster of Watergate, I think Billy Graham learned a humbling lesson. I think he was like a moth to the flame, but that burned him.
Graham sought to distance himself from American political power, but he witnessed a growing movement seeking to use religion for political gain.
American civic religion was very intentionally created by our federal government through several administrations in the middle of the 20th century. And so it's kind of Christian in form, but it's really pagan, because it's not so much about our humbly submitting to the will of the Creator. It's really about invoking God's blessing on our own goals and aspirations.
Religion, or the faith, always functions best from the margins of society and not in the councils of power. Once you begin to seek political influence or political power, you lose your prophetic voice.
Billy Graham learned the dangers of mixing religion and politics. But not all religious leaders have learned his lesson.
Scary things happen when political power is used to enforce religion. People's consciences are violated, people who resist face persecution, and people in power easily become corrupted because human beings weren't designed to compel one another's consciences.
The danger of a religio-political alliance is that it allows politics to garner the spiritual force of the church to advance its agenda, and the church to garner the force of the state to advance hers. The offspring of such religio-political union is spiritual deception and physical coercion, potentially compelling all to comply with agendas that go counter to God's word.
Billy Graham died having preached Christianity to more people than any other in history. His long life revealed the danger of mixing religion with politics. But the peace and prosperity that he sought to cultivate in his homeland would be ruptured by an attack with lasting devastation. The prophecy foretold a coming worldwide crisis, a time when personal freedoms would be stripped and individual loyalty to God would be tested. The second beast was given power to give life to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and make all who refuse to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark. Every year, millions of tourists stream into the modern-day capital of the world. But in 2001, New York City and the world were forever changed.
So I saw people coming out of the World Financial Center right about the time that the plane hit. So I went around the other side and went over by the American Stock Exchange, and you could see the fire from there, and it was horrific. There was their body parts strewn out that way. It was not nice. It was not nice.
The weeks after 9/11 brought the invasion of Afghanistan and the establishment of the Patriot Act.
I will not forget the wound to our country and those who inflicted it. I will not yield. I will not rest. I will not relent in waging this struggle for freedom and security for the American people.
The Patriot Act gave the U.S. government sweeping authority to go in and investigate people that potentially could be terrorist suspects, to detain them and question them in ways that previously wouldn't have been allowed under the law, to conduct surveillance in ways that previously had been repressed or limited. And so it really just gave the U.S. government not quite a blank check, but certainly a greater free hand to prosecute a war on terror. So even though we call it a war on terror, it's in some ways a stepped up intelligence and almost police action where you're trying to identify and track down either individual perpetrators or small groups that are often working within countries rather than traditional nation states doing battle together.
As we wage the war on terror overseas, we're also going after the terrorists here at home. And one of the most important tools we have used to protect the American people is the Patriot Act.
The events of 9/11 and the resulting Patriot Act removed rights and freedoms. Guantanamo Bay became a symbol of abuse, injustice, and disregard for the rule of law. A place where terrorism suspects could be detained without a process and interrogated without restraint.
We are going to treat them exactly right.
That's right. We're going to treat them humanely, and it will be appropriate to their circumstance.
The beauty of the United States is that we are a nation of laws, and those laws include an abhorrence of torture, an abhorrence of taking people outside the legal process. And once you start doing that with some group of people, well, you're on a slippery slope. And it's a very, very, very dangerous slippery slope to be on.
At some point, the freedoms that Americans have enjoyed and the freedoms that America has pioneered for the world, eventually, these are going to go away.
The international response to 9/11 revealed the power of America's global influence.
Revelation 13 uses this curious phrase, the image of the beast. The image here is an image of Christendom throughout the ages where the powers of church and state came together. Revelation 13 very clearly divides between those who receive the mark of the beast and those who don't. And that government power will be brought to bear by the religious majority against the minority who are dissenters.
Those who remain loyal to God alone will be seen as disruptors in the eyes of world governments, and they will be identified by the biblical way in which they worship.
At the end time, worship will be the main issue. The book of Revelation paints what worship will be like at the end time. It says, "Here are they that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus." This is, it says, the everlasting gospel of those who worship him, who made the heavens and the earth and the seas and the springs of water. This language is taken from the fourth commandment, which emphasizes God's creation in 6 days and his rest on the Sabbath.
So you have Jesus Christ and the seventh-day Sabbath, or you have the Antichrist and the first-day imposter Sabbath. And the whole world is going to be brought to a decision point. Are you going to be loyal to Jesus Christ, or are you going to follow the Antichrist? And in the final analysis, loyalty is the issue. Sabbath just happens to be the framework, the canvas upon which we paint our decisions.
The dramatic events of 9/11 reshaped the modern world. Personal freedoms were taken away in the fight for global democracy and justice. The prophecy outlines that worldwide movements will one day persecute God's true believers. The Bible's prophecies accurately foretold the rise of a new nation that formed a government based on the principles of liberty. But this nation persecuted the most vulnerable, grew to influence all corners of the earth, and formed a worldwide lasting alliance. An alliance that will one day force the world to worship the creature rather than the creator.
Shortly after 9/11, I was taking a high-speed ferry from the west side of Manhattan down. It was shortly after the attacks, and I remember looking over and seeing the buildings gone, and then seeing the Statue of Liberty and getting instantly choked up, because there is something so beautiful and so noble about that statue and about what it represents. Even though we'd been attacked there she stood holding out her torch to strangers to say, we want you to come here.
Standing on broken shackles and shining her light to the world, Lady Liberty still holds her torch. She overlooks a city that once was ground zero for human horror, but still welcomes foreigners and outcasts. As earthly powers meet their downfall, God's final message of hope lights up the world with an invitation for all to worship the Creator of heaven and earth. A call to worship a loving God who offers peace in troubled times. And a call to follow Jesus wherever he goes.